get this started.
Yeah.
All right, so it's a pleasure to talk to you again.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm talking to you today because of your movie Panopticon, which is, I will, in the YouTube description, as well as in the Ace of Spades blog post, I will provide a direct link, of course. It's a little sci-fi movie. Jeff, you seem to be very proud of the fact that you made it for $5,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't really look it. It's well filmed. There are a lot of tropes around small movies that you kind of expect to see. Very small casts, very limited sets. And while it is a small cast, you tend to move around a lot. And it really helps expand the feel of the movie, so it doesn't feel like, one person in their apartment filming a movie. But it does look a lot more than its $5,000. It's the story of two software engineers and one of their wives who develop a method for reading and playing back memories, as well as dreams, as we find out. And I wanted to start off asking you, in my mind, there are two main points to talk about here in terms of the story overall. The first is the core idea of the technology, and the other is how you took that core idea of the technology and turned it into a movie, turned it into an actual story. So do you think you could talk a little bit about where you got the idea for the technology, and then how you developed that into a movie?
You mean the memory technology?
Yes.
What I thought when I wrote it, it was an original idea that downloading memories hadn't been used before in a film. It didn't seem like a stretch for me in terms of the technology that's up and coming, that this wouldn't be happening in the future. So it's not you don't have to make a great leap to see that eventually we're going to be there. Whether it's a year or 50 years or 100 years from now, it will happen. So when I had written it and started planning the movie, this was roughly early 2015, I saw Brainstorm, which was the 1984 or 82 film with Natalie Wood. I don't know if you've seen that. She actually died during the making of it. And it was very similar in concept, that they would download memories, see memories, and relive memories. She died in the middle of that movie, so what was a very serious movie, I thought, at the beginning, turned into a strange farce. I think Christopher Walken's in it as well. So I thought this was original. Whether how it's going to happen, I don't know. I am a software engineer by profession, but that's beyond me. But we think it pretty clear it's going to happen eventually. And so I decided to write a story around this and what would be the consequences of this happening in a fictional world. And what happens to memories, not just immediately, the impact on society, but what happens in 100, 200, 100,000 years from now with these memories. So that's the fictional part of the science fiction. And so I decided to follow this. Originally, I was thinking this would be an easy movie to shoot. I had a number of other scripts that I'd done, but I thought this was the one to do. As it turned out, it took a year to shoot, to photograph, because there were a lot of little montages and shots and things that I wanted to do. So it wasn't just one scene following one scene after another. That's why it took a long time. And yeah. So did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Yeah. So that leads me to questions about the filming itself. So the first question I had as I was watching it is, how do you cast a movie with a $5,000 budget? You've got people there for weeks, I would assume, just in terms of principal photography, not to mention all of the stuff you had to capture for the snippets here and there, but you have people there for weeks at a time, and I'm assuming you're not paying them a whole lot. How did you manage to get a full cast together and keep them together throughout filming?
Well, I found Joshua Bearwald at an audition we held in December of 2014, and he seemed like a capable actor. He wanted to get some experience, and he helped get actors that he knew together. So I didn't know any of the actors myself until I met them through Josh. And I don't know, I was a little delusional. I think you have to be delusional to make a movie for this little amount of money. I didn't really have $5,000 in my head for the budget. I just said I'll pay whatever it takes, and I cut the actors in for a percentage, assuming there's any profit, and there hasn't been yet. And most of them are inexperienced but capable, and actors as well as crew will want to join an effort like this, sometimes with a cut of the profit, but just for the experience. So that's what we did, and I was lucky, very lucky to have actors who stuck with me for over a year through the shooting. And we would do a scene every 2 weeks or 3 weeks on the weekend. A lot of the time it was just Josh and myself be behind the camera down at his apartment, shooting a lot of these little montages. But for the larger scenes, we had to have a sort of a crew there. We had a DP who was very talented, who came off the Vampire Diaries as a lighting technician here in Atlanta, and he was willing to stick with us as well. And he was very capable, but slow, because you can't get that quality of lighting without spending time on it. And he would bring in his crew as well, and I did have to pay them a little bit. I had to cut them a check, not a lot, barely minimum wage, if that. But it was at least I wanted to show them some appreciation. And a lot of them, you don't cut them in for percentages. They're not really interested in that anyway. So somehow we managed to do it. It did take a long time because we had to do it we had to do a scene twice, once every 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And that's what took so long, but that's how I could do it so cheaply as well, because otherwise you would do it, you do it in 4 weeks, and you'd have to pay everybody because that's their job. So that's how you get away with it.
Well, interesting. Okay, thank you. So let's.
Sorry, I think, by the way, I was just talking about how you make a feature film for such a small amount. I was thinking of other films as I was shooting this, thinking of David Lynch, for instance, Eraserhead, which took 5 years to shoot. And I think he shot it for $150,000. But that was back in the days of film. It was much more expensive. Right. Just film. That's why with the digital revolution, we can do it a lot more cheaply.
Yeah, I was thinking of, Primer, you had mentioned earlier.
Right.
I was thinking Eraserhead. I was actually thinking, just because I watched it yesterday, Denis Villeneuve's Enemy, and Jake Gyllenhaal. I thought of that as well. There's some similarities there. But yeah, it's amazing what you can do with so little money. You just need the camera and the goodwill of those around you, and you can do it. And I noticed, I was going through the IMDb page of Panopticon earlier today, and I noticed that you have a lot of credits on this. So you did a lot of the heavy work yourself. Yeah,
that's how you do it as well. For that, I had to write the music, otherwise you have to get someone else to do it. And the editing, which is part of the creative process. I wanted to do that. But the sound editing, which is editing sound, is not fun. It's not in my wheelhouse. But somebody had to do it, and it took months because you have to clean up all the audio and provide the Foley. And so yeah, that's how you make a movie for very little money. You do it yourself.
So did you develop a little Foley studio in your basement?
No. Did it right here. Didn't really go around recording footsteps or anything. I downloaded a lot of free audio files and worked. So it was a great experience. And and you feel like you accomplished something.
Yeah.
And now, but the real trick, the most difficult part is trying to find an audience and get it out there.
Oh, I completely understand.
And you as a writer probably know that as well. Trying to get it to people and get some attention. So, yeah.
Great. Thinking again back to influences and that sort of line. I felt like there was a direct reference to 2001 late in the movie when I started calling it, the last about 5 minutes of the movie, I started calling it the Stargate sequence. In reference to Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite at the end of 2001. And what made me think of it was the second I saw the shot of the door, I'm assuming it's in the attic, as you pushed in, it felt like that push into the monolith.
Yeah.
Is that in your mind?
You know, I love 2001. I'm actually old enough to have seen it originally when it was in the theaters. Now I was 8 years old, and it affected me very profoundly. And made me want to make movies. But life intervened until recently when I could do it. So yeah, it's not an homage or anything. It's just I like the shot, and it definitely reminds me of that final shot of 2001. And I like Kubrick's framing, and I used some of that, the balanced framing. So yeah, and there's some of the visual effects might look a little bit like the Stargate episode, sequence. I didn't really intend that. That's just how it turned out.
Well, Well, it's the last few minutes are very I don't know, esoteric. They're not terribly literal, and so it's more of a visual thematic similarity more than a direct reference. And then it just, you have that moment that just, a second I saw it, it's like,
yeah, there you go.
That's that shot.
There you go.
Let's you mentioned sound editing. I was curious if you had to do any ADR, any additional dialogue recording.
Oh
yeah.
We had quite a lot. You could probably hear it because you can usually tell ADR. Definitely with on a budget like this, we had to record it right here because a lot of those scenes down at Josh's apartment, where the main character lives, outside was a hotel and the air conditioner was right there. We couldn't hear each other talk, so we had to loop those scenes and a few others, just because the audio was dirty and a lot of the memories that you are not just visual, they're auditory. So we had to loop those. Well, we had to record those off screen, obviously. So there was a lot of that as well. Yeah.
Okay. I thought I'd heard it. It wasn't as obvious as it can be in smaller budgets. But I just thought I heard it, and I was curious because I was kind of questioning it. I wasn't for sure.
There was actually quite a lot. Yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
I only really thought about it about halfway through. It's like, that particular exchange sounded a little ADR-y. So I wasn't noticing from the beginning. Although I did watch it. I did watch your movie again earlier today in preparation. But just out of curiosity, just to keep myself fresh since it's been about a week. But I just wanted to, and I didn't even really think about it as I was going through there as well. You did well. So for someone who's not that comfortable with sound engineering, you did it quite well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now you mentioned the music. You wrote your own music. It's not. It's obviously not heavy theme based. It's not John Williams sweeping up an emotion at the end of E.T. But I was really thinking of John Carpenter when I was listening to it, and I think how John Carpenter describes the way he uses his own music is that he wants it as wallpaper in his movies, where it just kind of helps sell a scene. Did you have that kind of thought process around when you were doing your own music?
Well, it's hard for me to talk about it because I was really somewhere else in my head when I was doing the music. I think it took me 3 months. I downloaded a synth, a virtual synth, and I have a keyboard. And I just played around for 3 months until I developed some of these sequence tones. And so I don't know. I wasn't rational, and it's not a rational process. So it's hard to articulate what was I thinking at the time or how to do it. It's just what it is, and it sounded good to me, and it worked in a scene. So it was just me at a keyboard. I'm not sure about, yeah, it's very synthesized like John Carpenter, his music as well. And it was my first time using a virtual synthesizer. So there was I was just playing around, and I got some really weird stuff that sort of fit the sci-fi theme. But beyond that, I didn't really have a rational or much of a thought process when it came to the music. I just put in what I thought would work.
Okay.
But I'm surprised how much fun I had, and I actually like the soundtrack a great deal. I mean, I listened to it, not because I wrote it, but just because I like it. So yeah.
Have you released that separately as like a download?
That's on. I put it up on YouTube, just trying to promote the film a little bit. You can get to it through our website. I don't know what else to do with it. There it is.
Well, there you are. It's all at this level. It's all self-promotion.
Yeah.
So I want to switch gears a little bit to talking about the lighting. I was kind of curious about this because you're shooting digitally. Digital tends to do a lot better in low light than film does. So I was wondering how it looked like most, if not all, of the. It obviously can't be true since you actually had a DP there, but it felt like a lot of it was sourced and natural lighting. But as you say, your DP Mark did a lot of work in order to get it up. How do you have an idea of the balance between like just purely sourced lighting and actual lighting fixtures that you put up?
Well, there was always an extra light or two besides the source, except for outdoors. So there was a lot of lighting that just when Mark did it for sure, because he brought out some real lights and would light the hell out of a scene. So I don't have a ratio, but there were always lights in every scene, which I think gives it that professional look that raises the level, the production value. Even scenes that I shot, and I had to shoot quite a few scenes because Mark was working that night or couldn't make it. So, and I'm not nearly as proficient as he is. And some of those scenes that are underlit, I'm probably behind the camera on that. But I was trying to do everything else. But definitely the lighting, I mean, it takes a long time, and that's why a lot of films that are done for no budget, which this is no budget, just look like somebody turned on their camera because they don't take the time to light it. And that's the difference. I mean, Mark T. Veratum, who is the DP, we got very lucky that he wanted to join us, and he wound up at the American Film Institute as a result of his work on our film, and so he's out there right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a particular shot late in the film during the chase. It looks like you're driving down the interstate, and you see this great flash of lightning.
Yeah.
Were you chasing the storm, or was that purely accidental?
That's pure After Effects.
That's what. That's what it was. It looked natural. It looked.
Yeah.
I've seen that kind of lighting before.
Sometimes you just want to liven up a shot. I had a shot outside my house where the main character walks away. Well, it's dark in the sky, and I want to put a moon up, so I put a moon up through After Effects. So a lot of. I don't know if this is true for professional films. It probably is, but in this film at least, a lot of shots have special effects because you want to make the shot more interesting, have a little fun. But yeah, there's that lightning. And looked pretty
It was
good.
good. I liked it. I really thought it was natural.
Yeah.
Let's
That
see.
was me, by the way, just driving down here in Atlanta, down 400 with a GoPro to the front of my truck, and I was just driving, and we got some great shots out of that. I'm just amazed at how good they look. And then I sped it up about twice as fast, so he's doing about 100, 120 miles an hour.
Well, cool.
Yeah.
Let's see here. There was one thing I wanted to make sure I did not miss. Nope, I guess that was it. I suppose the one question I want to ask every filmmaker I interview is, what is the most recent lesson that you learned about filmmaking? Whether it could be something like very technical, it could be something about narrative, how to build it together. But it's something you learned yesterday, last week, a month ago. What was the most recent thing you learned about filmmaking, about the craft?
Wow, most recent. I have to think. I don't have a particular lesson I've learned, but I'm learning things about how to get attention for an effort that you've done, like a film. How do you do it? And that's part of this process. What we're going through now is part of the process, is trying to get attention to have people look at the film. We submitted this to about 10 film festivals, and it was turned down by even small festivals. And each time you get a rejection, it's a kick in the stomach, and it makes you doubt whether what you've done is worthwhile, whether you doubt your talent. It's really hard, and you don't know what to say about that because you don't get feedback at all. So having to get it out there after the film festival, we stopped doing that, just putting it on Amazon and getting some attention. The lesson that I'm trying to learn is how do you do that, and it's not easy because a lot of films are being made now, and by people like me, or I'm kind of in the basement. People even at the first floor who have money and are getting some B or C quality stars or name stars, name actors in their film. Well, that draws attention. I mean, it's still the name of an actor will draw attention and get you some eyeballs. So that's the difficult part. And I don't know what to do with it. I wrote scripts for a long time, 10, 15 years, and I would finish a script, and then you think, what do you do with it? Because I don't know anybody in Hollywood, and I have no connections. And as a writer, you may encounter something as well. What do you do with your book when you're finished? Well, you can send it off, but you can send it off and have it read and maybe published. But I think the publishing industry, as far as I know, is probably a little bit in the same, is a little bit like Hollywood now as well. They're not interested in smaller films or books, possibly, that won't earn them an enormous amount of money. I mean, that Hollywood is going through a transition now, as far as I understand it, where small films are really on the out. And when I say small films, I mean films that won't gain more than, or won't profit them more than less than 100 million or something like that. That's the impression I get. So the lesson that I most recently learned, or I'm trying to learn, is how to get attention. And I don't have a solution yet.
Well, it's something that we're all working on. So I'll just finish this up with, it looks like, according to your IMDb page, you have another movie that you're trying to get off the ground, Start Craving Naked.
Yeah.
Change in genres. Looks like it's a comedy. You want to tell us anything about that?
Yeah. Well, I will say, first of all, one of the reasons I chose to do Panopticon is because you have to think, I'm making this small movie, small feature. How can I differentiate myself from what Hollywood does? Well, you can't make Lawrence of Arabia in your backyard, and you can't make Star Wars in your basement. So you have to go for what Hollywood will not do. or probably wouldn't do. So I went into what I call the weird sci-fi genre. Um, Hopefully to keep people thinking and keep their eyes glued to the screen. Most people at my level would probably go with horror, because horror is still an acceptable genre for no budget. You can hit a home run with horror. Maybe you can with sci-fi. The guy, I forget his name, who made Primer, he hit a home run with that. But that was back in the early 2000s. And he made, I don't know if you've seen it, the Upstream Color, which is another sci-fi-ish movie. Very, very strange, very weird, and enjoyable for me. So that's the genre I decided to go with, in lieu of horror, because I didn't have a horror script at the time. Now I'm writing about 2 or 3 scripts a year now, and I keep writing down, in other words, down in budget, not up, but down in budget, because I want to do it myself. And so I have a number of scripts and ideas, concepts up on our webpage, so I can point people to it and say, what do you think? Stark Raving Naked is one that I had written before Panopticon. It's a kind of sex rom, Woody Allen sex rom. And we were going to do it. We found a couple of actors who were very good. We shot a pitch for it. You can see it on our webpage. And it's just sort of, we haven't raised the money. That's all it comes down to. So I wrote another one, just recently finished it last week, called Dazed, which is somewhat similar. It's another screwball-type comedy, which I like that genre. But I think I can do that for 15 grand, which is an enormous budget to me. So I have a number of films that can be done for very little money, I think. That's how I write. And it's just a matter of finding that very little money, which is a trick. It's very hard.
Oh, I completely understand.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. This has been great. I'll provide, of course, links to everything, to Panopticon and to your website as well. We'll help get the word out about a struggling artist, just like I am. And
I'm sorry, I just wanted to say, before I forget, I think this is what we've been talking about, is how do you make generally a first film, even at my age, for very little money. And people have done it. And I think this would make an interesting feature or article that you might be interested in, is to look at those films that were made for these small amounts of money, and how did they do it, and what was the net result. And I'm actually thinking it'd be interesting to write a book, and I'm thinking of it, how we made this movie, because there are a lot of people who want to make feature films, and they may be able to get 5 or 10 grand. And just walk them through this process. What the end result is much more difficult, which is how do you get eyeballs, and how do you return the investment to your actors or to your investors. But anyway, I was thinking of you, thinking that might be interesting to look at some of those films. One I saw recently, I just want to mention, was Coherence. Have you seen Coherence?
I have not, no.
I was on Amazon Prime. You can still see it. I'm not sure it's on Prime, but it's a sci-fi film that they made for 50 grand. They shot it in 1 week, and it's rough production values, but I really like the idea. In the end, it's science fiction, and it's a little hard to swallow the concept. But if you disregard that, it works, and it's really nicely done. And it keeps you thinking, and I was kind of hoping that's what our movie would do, and keep the audience thinking, because I don't think we have enough of that in film today.
I will definitely check it out. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me, David, and we'll talk to you soon.
We'll talk again soon, I'm sure.